Hello everyone, so our presentation today is about David Bowie. This PowerPoint and presentation is by Ashley Gonzalez, Natalia Martinez, Celeste Luis, Aminah Yeargin, and Roxana Cruz.
David Bowie was one of the biggest, he was known to be one of the biggest influences in music. He had a very unique style in the type of music that he was doing. He kind of adapted the genre of glam rock, and he was known for to be the forefather of androgyny. And he was never afraid to bend gender norms and use gender-binding alter egos to allow a degree of ambiguity around his sexuality. So basically, we're going to talk about how he kind of used these different personas throughout his career to kind of challenge gender norms, and in a way it was not necessarily him changing, more like putting on a performance, which is very a camp way to do it. So he would kind of put a performance on through these different types of personas that he would do, and then through the lens of queer theory, it offers a framework in understanding non-normative genders and sexualities, and the aesthetic devices employed in the performance of gender and sexuality, such as camp and drag. And through that lens, we can navigate through Bowie's choices and as a musician and a queer individual.
Hi, my name is Roxana Cruz, and I will be presenting to you what queer theory is and how David Bowie portrayed its concepts and ideas in his career. As Jody states in her text, queer theory resists prevailing limitations of sexual identity and gender identity. It states that a person may at different times in their life desire different bodies or objects. Gender identity is a person's perception of having a particular gender which may or may not correspond with their birth sex. Sexuality is a person's preference. My interpretation of this theory is that it claims sexual and gender identity can be fluid and change throughout one's life. It goes beyond gay and lesbian agendas, showing that there is much more. It does not judge things to be gay or lesbian, but to acknowledge that there is a whole spectrum to sexuality, as it is seen to be seen like a river that runs continuously. Looking at Bowie's career, a lot of people wondered about his sexuality. He showed his fluidity and his sexuality through his androgynous persona Ziggy Stardust. Ziggy Stardust was an alien rock star from outer space that was seen as a symbol to his queer audience, as they felt like aliens in their own lives. Ziggy promoted sexual deviance, which is what queer theory looks at outside of the mainstream. Besides his persona, Bowie illustrated his fluidity in interviews. In 1972, Bowie came out as gay. In 1976, he came out as bisexual. And then, to quote Bowie, he said, "Identifying as bisexual was, quote-unquote, the biggest mistake I ever made," as he felt he had always been more of a closeted heterosexual. Although he felt like he had always been a heterosexual, throughout his career he still showed that a man can dress up in women's clothing and makeup and not necessarily be gay, or that a man can be dating the hottest fashion model and not necessarily be straight. His music video for his song Boys Keep Swinging was for his lover at the time, Romy Hogg. She was a Dutch transgender performance artist and nightclub owner. In this music video, he is seen dressed up in 3 different drag looks, singing backup. He then walks down the stage in drag, taking off his wig and smearing off his lipstick. Moments like these are what impacted his audience to rethink.
Hello, my name is Aminah, and I'm going to be talking to you about David Bowie in regards to camp. When it comes to camp, David Bowie can easily be described as its embodiment. For example, him as Ziggy Stardust. Bowie himself, but also Ziggy Stardust, defied both gender and social norms. As a result of him doing this was bringing androgyny to mainstream media, and this was all through the way he dressed and the makeup he wore. In addition to all of this, his music talked about sexuality and other social taboos, which all just contribute to his camp aesthetic even more. Now, by doing this, Bowie received a ton of backlash surrounding him, with comments questioning his manhood and whether or not he should be allowed to perform what he did the way he did. However, this didn't stop him. In an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, Bowie said, "I don't want to climb out of my fantasies in order to go up on stage. I want to take them on stage with me." This meaning that he wanted to bring everything he dreamt of and everything he felt on stage with him. He wanted to be open and honest throughout the entire show rather than more and more as the show went on or more and more as his career went on. Another large part of camp is theatricality, which Bowie was definitely a master of. In an interview with The Guardian, Bowie says, "If we have theatricality, it comes through from us as people, not as a set of environment or stage. I'm a very professional person, and I feel that I contribute all my energies into my stage performance. That when I'm on stage, I give more to an audience than to anybody else when I'm off stage." This clearly showing how much he cared for his fans and how much he wanted to give. He acted.
Hello, my name is Ashley, and I'll be speaking about David Bowie's fashion and his incorporation of camp aesthetic and attitude. So throughout his career, David Bowie wore very extravagant and flamboyant attire, something not really seen as a norm for a quote-unquote male. He managed to create a fine line between feminine attire and male attire, and in the 70s this was very queer and rebellious for someone to do. And although drag makeup and camp were seen to be done by individuals in the queer community, it was still missing to the general public. So for a rock star like David Bowie to wear and embody camp gender bender outfits, a lot of attention was drawn to him and how he presented himself and identified himself. So Bowie used fashion and makeup to represent his androgynous and camp persona to identify himself. With that, a lot of questions regarding his sexuality uprose, as what he was wearing was seen as feminine and quote-unquote very different for a man to be wearing. As we know, Bowie never became clear or answered such questions of his sexuality. We do know that he did have a few marriages and rumors of him being involved with Mick Jagger. David Bowie was a true camp rock star that created a legacy, and to this day his work and fashion have influenced many artists and many fashion designers to incorporate pieces that he wore and also makeup inspired looks. So for this next slide, I gathered a few quotes of articles speaking highly of Bowie and his fashion and makeup impact. So for the first quote by Smith and Strudwick, he talks about how in the 70s Bowie was seen as a gender bender, a term today we might shudder at. So he was really just a beginning. He really started a legacy for himself, kind of unconscious, because he did wear clothes that were seen to be feminine as a way to just embody himself and to identify himself. So it wasn't really seen as something that he wanted for people to just look at him and stuff. So for the next quote by the Boff team, Bowie exaggerated his use of makeup and theatrical stage outfits were seen far more controversial than his androgynous style revival, who solely relied on eyeliner and a feminine pout. So even though he did start off with doing small things like wearing makeup and wearing heels or something, it was seen as something very rebellious and very camp and very queer. And from then, he just started being more comfortable with himself and being more comfortable with trying new things. So these next slides are images of Bowie in such campus outfits. We can overall see that he was not afraid to pose a certain way, incorporate makeup, dress feminine, and bring the outfits out on stage. From wearing mix and match patterns to wearing platform heels, Bowie is not afraid to show the amount of clothes he could wear or the amount of clothes he couldn't wear, which is very extravagant and a queer statement. The next slide again is a visual demonstration of his outfits and makeup, his iconic makeup that we know of color contour and his orange hair. Bowie was able to dress highly and was able to undress on stage. That was a clear enough message of gender bending and being able to just wear clothes beyond the norm. To conclude, David Bowie was a camp embodiment from fashion and makeup. His extravagant, exaggerated looks were not intentional to create a riot, but rather a self-expressive medium to be as feminine or as masculine as he wanted.
Hey, my name's Natalia, and I'll be talking about David Bowie's music. So like I said, he was one of the biggest influences in music, but not only in soft rock, but just like the different personas that he would have throughout his career. So he had like a total of 5 different ones that he kind of performed. They were Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, The Thin White Duke, The Goblin King and The Blind Project, which was like the last one before he passed away. And then so basically it was just kind of like this, he would use it as like a dramatical like a dramatic sense in his like music. Like it was kind of like a performance as like a performer. It was like one of his main like things he would use like in his shows and like in his albums and stuff. So it definitely brought it on to like rock music. So that was like one of like the biggest things that he was known for. And his influences on like artists is like, it's like big. It's like him and Prince were like the two biggest influences, like the two biggest like artists that people like found interest in and like were influenced from. Like Bowie's albums, they weren't necessarily the same, like they were all different, and it kind of made critics and his fans anticipate what he would do next, because each one of his albums were different, so they never knew what was gonna be what was coming. To him, he saw music as a narrative, and with the inventions of the characters that he created, like Ziggy and The Blind Project and stuff, it became like part of his creative style. And quote, he said, "For me, rock was always about narrative, or putting forward little stories and ideas, however strange or off the wall they might be." Like, and then he like I said, he always kept his fans on his toes as he transitioned through his different personas, and with that also transitioned his style of music. So basically, as he transitioned his personas and when he created them, it also was part of, or that's what he would also change his style of music. So it went from like synthetic driven dance music to like pop to like jazz and like soul music. It kind of like it would change throughout, and it would come back too, because his last album was like a lot of like he was driven a lot with like jazz and stuff, and like he had such a like influence on like obviously the generations like that were growing up at the time of when he was like at his prime. So like the people who were coming of age in like the 70s and 80s and stuff, and like so on. But like he's like a big influence in like artists now, like Kanye West, Madonna, and like more like known like Lady Gaga is like, as you'll see in like the next couple slides, he influenced her a lot in her performances as well. Like she's also the type to be a performer, so like she puts on these different personas as well, so he influenced that a lot. And then these are like two music performances that these are two songs like of his that we chose from. One of them is called Boys Keep Swinging, the other one's called Fashion. So I'm going to play a little bit of both, and I'm going to kind of like skip a little bit so you can kind of see.
Heaven loves you, the clouds part for you, nothing stands in your way when you're a boy. Clothes always fit you, life is a pop of the cherry when you're a boy. When you're a boy, you can wear a uniform. When you're a boy, other boys check you out. You get a girl. You say your favorite things when you're a boy. Boys, boys, boys keep swinging. Boys always work it out.
So that's a little bit of that one. I was gonna try to like skim to like the part where he plays a drag, but it won't let me. So I'm gonna play Fashion now. it's a little bit of both. Go ahead and talk about that. All right, so in the song "Boys Keep Swinging," one of his many acts of gender, it was one of his many like acts of like the gender transgressions. These different personas are not created to just transform, but it's also part of gender play. So basically, in the music video, well, in the song, he's kind of talking about like boys and like just like they pop their cherry and stuff. It's kind of like boys kind of like coming into age and stuff, but in a kind of more androgynous way. And in the music video, he plays a lot with drag. So that's like he has like different he'll play around with like the drag and like and have fun with it, because he kind of like in some point in the video he like rips off his wig and stuff. So he like plays around with it. These different personas are not created to just transform, but it's part of gender play. So it was like I was saying, like he didn't necessarily like try to like use it as like, he didn't like, not necessarily like in the video, but like in general his personas that he would use in throughout his career, they weren't necessarily him transforming, but it was like him using it as a performance. Judith Butler describes gender performativity as, quote, an act of mimicry that she described as drag. Bowie's gender performativity is transgressive due to his fluid shifts between androgyny, masculinity, and alterity. So yeah, and then the song Fashion, Bowie said he was trying to move on a little from like that Ray Davis concept of fashion to suggest more of a gritted teeth determination and assurance of why one's doing it. So basically kind of like going from something so basic and, you know, common to something more obscure, out there, like performative and stuff. So he definitely would play a lot with gender, and he would not conform, and like he used it as like a way of like performing, and it definitely helped a lot of like LGBT people to kind of see somebody so big and love to kind of play around with that and be so open with it, and it kind of helped them too. So that's we'll be talking more about like his influence on that, but he definitely in his music too, like in his lyrics there he's talking a lot of like, obviously a lot of his music is kind of directed a little bit towards men, and kind of like is like kind of like an eye-opener, kind of like a message to them and kind of stuff like that. So he definitely obviously had like a very big influence on people kind of opening up and stuff.
Hi everyone, today I'm going to be focusing on David Bowie as Ziggy Stardust. So to start, Ziggy Stardust is a song from The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, which was an album by David Bowie. Ziggy Stardust stemmed from Bowie's fascination with space travel and science fiction. Ziggy Stardust is like an alter ego of this omnisexual alien rock star sent to Earth as an extraterrestrial messenger. So in being an alien, this helped fans to accept the alternative vision of homosexuality, and I think because both were seen as different than what was socially normal at the time. Creating space creatures let people define the unknown, and common knowledge about homosexuality was extremely lacking at the time. This doesn't surprise me because I'm sure at the time there were little to no exposure on the LGBTQ community. People were more open to Ziggy's sexual deviance because they were already open to celebrating his deviance as an alien. And I think that's how people connected the two. So this quote I chose by David Bowie says, "Ziggy is in a position where all kids have access to things they thought they wanted. The older people have lost all touch with reality, and the kids are left on their own to plunder anything." Ziggy was in a rock and roll band, and the kids no longer wanted rock and roll. There's no electricity to play it. So I think gay fans and fans in general did not identify more with Ziggy than Bowie. I think they just understood and respected him as a character. So Ziggy in the LGBTQ community. He made sexual deviance popular, which encouraged a strong gay fandom. Although he didn't give a new perspective on gay culture or break any common stereotypes about gay men, he did sing about gay stereotypes at the time when it was considered a taboo. People became more open to homosexuality in general because of the influence that David Bowie had on American culture and the popularization of sexual deviance. Through the essence of Bowie, gay fans and queer people across America could become a stronger community to further their interest for social acceptance and equality. And I think this in itself helped the gay community and queer community to find an acceptance in mainstream culture and music, and this kind of is what gave Bowie a strong gay fan base. Okay, so this next slide is titled Influence and Inspiration. This is a collage I made of both artist Lady Gaga and David Bowie. I think it's pretty evident that Bowie had a major role throughout Lady Gaga's entire musical career and artwork. In the first set of pictures, we see how Ziggy Stardust's lightning bolt stemmed Lady Gaga's lightning bolt during the Fame era. Although they're both different colors, they're both on the same eye, and we can kind of see the similarities between the two. This was in one of Lady Gaga's songs called Just Dance, and I find it relating back to David Bowie's song called Let's Dance. So the next set is of Lady Gaga on the red carpet right before she performed a David Bowie tribute after he had passed away. She performed many of his popular songs such as Space Oddity, Fashion, and of course Ziggy Stardust. We can also see how she replicated one of his looks with the red hair, blue eyeshadow, and the blue outfit. I would consider Lady Gaga a big fan of Bowie's because she even got a portrait of his face tatted on her torso after he had passed away. Okay, and the next set we can see the similarities between the two as well, with kind of the blank white canvas makeup with splashes of colorful paint on top. David Bowie's artwork is super present in a lot of Lady Gaga's work. Since Bowie gave the LGBTQ community a space in mainstream music, I believe this encouraged artists like Lady Gaga to do the same. It's also important to note that they both created safe spaces for the community and giving them a space to just kind of be themselves and feel good about being themselves. So I wouldn't consider Lady Gaga to be appropriating Ziggy Stardust or David Bowie. I think it's more of like an appreciation and inspiration on her part.
These next slides are works cited, and that is all for our presentation. Thank you.